Widowed Apache woman dragged me from the river. Now she calls me hers. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. The river stretched out before him, its waters sparkling and moving with a gentle but constant flow. He had been traveling for days, seeking the quiet and solitude of the wilderness, away from the noise of towns and cities. The forest around the river was alive with the sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional croak of a frog. It felt peaceful, almost magical, and for a moment he allowed himself to forget the weight of the world he had left behind. He approached the river carefully, wanting to cross it to continue his journey. The water looked calm on the surface, but he knew better than to trust appearances. He had seen rivers like this before, harmless at first glance but carrying hidden currents that could sweep a person away. Still, the thought of adventure and the desire to see what lay on the other side pushed him forward. He rolled up his sleeves and tested the water with his foot. It was cold, sending a shiver up his spine, but manageable. Taking a deep breath, he stepped in. At first, everything went smoothly. The water reached only to his knees and the current seemed weak. He laughed quietly to himself, feeling proud of his courage. But then, without warning, the river seemed to change. A hidden swirl of water caught his foot, and suddenly he was losing his balance. Panic rose in his chest as the current tugged at him, pulling him off his feet. He flailed, trying to grab onto the rocks and branches along the bank, but they were just out of reach. The river was stronger than he had imagined, and its grip was relentless. Water rushed into his mouth and nose, choking him as he struggled to stay afloat. He gasped for air, his heart pounding in terror. Every instinct told him to fight, but the river had other plans. It tossed him like a leaf, carrying him further from safety. His vision blurred, and he began to feel the cold seep deep into his bones. For the first time in a long while, he felt completely powerless. The world seemed to shrink to the roaring water around him, and he wondered if this might be the end. Then, out of nowhere, a hand reached for him. It was strong, firm, and sure. He felt himself being pulled from the river, dragged across slippery rocks and wet soil until he collapsed onto the riverbank, gasping and shaking. Sitting there, drenched and trembling, he finally looked up. The woman who had saved him was unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was an Apache woman, her dark hair falling around her shoulders, her eyes sharp and steady. Even though she was a stranger, there was a sense of power and determination about her that made him feel both awe and gratitude. She spoke to him softly, asking if he was all right, her voice calm but commanding. He could only nod, too stunned to form words. He tried to thank her, but the words caught in his throat, choked by relief and exhaustion. She didn't scold him for being careless, didn't question why he had been crossing the river alone. Instead, she simply helped him to sit up, covering him with a dry blanket she had brought. Her hands were strong but gentle, and the warmth of her care was something he had not expected. In that moment, he realized he owed his life to this woman. As he sat there, shivering and recovering, he noticed the quiet strength in her movements. She moved with purpose, tending to him without hesitation, her eyes scanning the surrounding area as if to make sure the danger had passed. There was no fear in her demeanor, no hesitation, only a calm awareness of the world and its hazards. He admired her courage, realizing that she was someone who had faced challenges in life and had learned to survive them with grace and determination. She offered him water and a small piece of bread, and though he had never met her before, he felt a strange sense of comfort in her presence. She did not speak much, but the way she looked at him conveyed understanding and empathy. It was as if she knew exactly what he had been through and that he had been frightened beyond measure. Her quiet confidence was reassuring, and for the first time since the river had claimed him, he felt a flicker of safety. The woman led him away from the riverbank to a small clearing where her home was nestled among the trees. It was simple but well kept, a reflection of her life, practical, purposeful, and self-sufficient. The air smelled of fresh earth and smoke from a small fire. He noticed small signs of her daily life, tools neatly arranged, firewood stacked, and a small garden thriving under her care. Everything spoke of someone who had learned to live in harmony with nature, someone who understood the land and respected it deeply. She guided him to a place to rest, helping him dry off and change into some spare clothes she had prepared. Every gesture was considerate, yet there was no hint of pity. She treated him as an equal, someone worthy of care and attention. As he sat quietly, trying to catch his breath and process what had just happened, he felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. It was more than just being saved. It was the way she had handled the situation with such calm assurance, without a trace of fear or hesitation. He wanted to ask her name, to know more about her, but the words felt inadequate. How could he express the depth of his gratitude? How could he convey the mix of awe and respect he felt for someone who had risked herself to save a stranger? She seemed to understand without words, her eyes meeting his in a quiet acknowledgement of what had just occurred. It was a connection forged in an instant, a bond created in the chaos of the river and the calm that followed. As he rested, wrapped in the blanket she had given him, he reflected on how fragile life could be. One moment he had been exploring and carefree. The next he had been at the mercy of nature, unsure if he would survive. And yet, in that moment of fear and uncertainty, he had encountered someone who embodied courage, strength, and compassion. The experience left an indelible mark on him, a memory that would shape the way he saw the world and the people in it. The woman sat nearby, tending to a small fire, her movements precise and deliberate. She didn't intrude, didn't demand conversation, but her presence was reassuring. He felt safe, as if nothing could harm him while she was there. Slowly, his fear began to ebb, replaced by curiosity and a desire to know more about the woman who had saved him. Who was she? What had her life been like? How had she become so strong and self-reliant? He realized that his adventure had led him to a place he had never expected, a place where courage and kindness intersected in the form of this remarkable woman. Hours passed, and the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. The protagonist finally managed to speak, his voice hoarse but sincere. He thanked her again, trying to convey the depth of his gratitude, though he knew words could never fully capture it. She nodded, a faint smile on her lips, acknowledging his thanks without making a fuss. It was clear that she had acted not for praise or recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. That evening, as he watched the river from the safety of her home, he felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and awe. The day had begun like any other, with the promise of exploration and adventure, but it had ended with a life-changing encounter. He realized that he had been given more than just a second chance. He had been given a glimpse into the strength and resilience of a person who had faced loss and hardship, yet remained unbroken. And in that moment, he felt a sense of respect and admiration that went beyond gratitude, a feeling that would stay with him forever. The river, once a symbol of danger and fear, now seemed almost peaceful, reflecting the colors of the sunset. He thought about how quickly life could change, how in a single moment everything could shift. One misstep could have cost him his life, yet here he was, alive and safe, thanks to the courage of a woman he had just met. The memory of her hands pulling him from the water, the calm in her eyes, and the strength in her voice would remain with him always, a reminder of the power of kindness and bravery in the face of uncertainty. As night fell, he finally drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep, the sounds of the river lulling him into rest. For the first time in days, he felt truly safe. The woman, ever watchful and steady, remained nearby, her presence a quiet reassurance that everything would be all right. In the darkness, he knew that life had taken an unexpected turn, one that would lead him to a story far greater than any adventure he had ever imagined. And it all began with the river, the struggle, and the extraordinary woman who had dragged him from its grasp. After the terrifying incident at the river, the young traveler awoke to the soft warmth of the sun streaming through the trees. He was still wrapped in the blanket the woman had given him, feeling the gentle weight of safety and care. His body ached from the struggle, and his mind was still heavy with the memory of nearly being swept away. Yet there was something else, a quiet curiosity about the woman who had saved him. He wanted to know more, who she was, what her life was like, and why she had acted with such courage without a single word of hesitation. The woman moved around her small clearing, tending to a few simple tasks. She prepared a modest breakfast, carefully arranging the food and placing it near him without saying much. Though her words were few, her actions spoke volumes. Every movement showed care and thoughtfulness, as if she had anticipated what he would need before he even realized it himself. He watched her, fascinated, realizing that her strength was not just in saving him from the river, but in the way she lived her life, quietly, efficiently, and with purpose. Tentatively, he took a few bites of the bread she had prepared and sipped some water. Each mouthful reminded him of how exhausted he truly was, and he began to feel the tension in his body slowly loosen. The river incident, terrifying as it had been, seemed further away now. Her calm presence had a soothing effect, and he found himself relaxing in ways he had not for days. He wanted to speak, to express his gratitude more fully, but words felt inadequate. How could he truly capture the depth of what he felt toward someone who had risked so much to save a stranger? After a while, she gestured toward the small garden near her home, as if inviting him to explore. Though hesitant, he followed, noticing the care she had put into each plant. The garden was simple, yet thriving, a reflection of her life, practical, grounded, and nurtured with patience. He knelt beside a patch of herbs, examining them closely. The woman watched silently, her eyes gentle but alert, as if reading his every thought. He realized that she was not just strong in moments of crisis, but also steady and resilient in the quiet, everyday tasks that required patience and skill. As he explored, she began to speak softly about her life. Her words were measured, filled with a quiet wisdom that came from years of experience. She told him of her late husband, how she had loved him deeply, and how his passing had left her to face the world alone. She spoke not with bitterness or sorrow, but with acceptance and strength. Listening to her, he could sense the depth of her resilience, the way she had adapted to loss and hardship while maintaining her dignity and independence. Her story was one of quiet courage, a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure. He found himself opening up in return, telling her about his own life, his travels, and the journey that had led him to this river. Though his words were simple, they carried honesty and vulnerability. In her presence, he felt no need to hide his fear, his exhaustion, or his uncertainty. She listened without judgment, her eyes steady and understanding, as if acknowledging his experiences without diminishing them. The more he spoke, the more he realized that this was the first time in a long while that someone had truly heard him, that someone had truly seen him in his entirety. Over the next few days, he stayed with her, helping with chores and learning about the land around her home. She showed him how to gather firewood safely, how to prepare simple meals, and how to move quietly through the forest without disturbing the natural balance. Each lesson was shared with patience and care, and he began to appreciate the depth of her knowledge. It was not just survival skills she taught, but a philosophy of life, a respect for nature, an understanding of one's own strength, and a sense of responsibility toward others. Their interactions were marked by small gestures that carried meaning. She would offer him a cup of water with a slight nod, or quietly hand him a tool he needed without a word. In these moments, he felt a growing bond, one built not on words alone, but on actions and shared experience. Her care was not demanding or intrusive, but present and consistent, creating a sense of trust that felt rare and precious. For him, this was a lesson in humility and gratitude, a reminder that kindness and strength often manifest in quiet, unassuming ways. As the days passed, he began to notice subtler aspects of her character. There was a calm authority in the way she moved, a quiet confidence in the way she spoke, and an unwavering patience in her actions. Even when tasks were difficult or frustrating, she did not complain or lose her composure. Her life had been shaped by challenges, yet she faced each day with determination and grace. Observing her, he felt inspired, realizing that courage was not only about heroics in moments of danger, but also about perseverance in everyday life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light across the clearing, he watched her tending a small fire. The shadows danced across her face, highlighting the lines of experience and wisdom etched there. He felt a deep admiration for her, not just for saving his life, but for the life she had built for herself and the quiet strength she radiated. It was a mixture of respect, gratitude, and curiosity that left him both humbled and intrigued. He wanted to know more about her, to understand the depths of her experiences and the choices that had brought her here. Their conversations, though sparse, became moments of connection. She would share stories of her past, tales of hardship and triumph, lessons learned from loss and perseverance. He would listen, captivated by her words, feeling a sense of belonging he had not experienced in a long time. The bond between them grew, not through grand gestures or declarations, but through shared moments, mutual respect, and the understanding that each had something valuable to offer the other. He began to notice the small ways she cared for him beyond basic necessities. When he seemed tired, she would encourage him to rest. When he struggled with a task, she would guide him patiently, offering tips and corrections with gentle authority. These gestures were not intrusive. They were expressions of a deeper empathy and understanding. Slowly, he realized that this connection was more than friendship. It was a bond that transcended circumstance, rooted in shared experience, trust, and an unspoken acknowledgement of each other's humanity. Despite the comfort he found in her presence, he could not ignore the lingering sense of vulnerability. He was a stranger in her world, someone whose life had intersected with hers in an unexpected and dramatic way. Yet she treated him as an equal, neither dismissing his fears nor belittling his gratitude. This balance of respect and care created a safe space, allowing him to relax and open himself fully. It was a rare gift, one that left him deeply moved and increasingly aware of the unique person she was. By the end of the week, he felt transformed. What had begun as a terrifying encounter at the river had evolved into something profoundly meaningful. He had been saved not just from the waters, but from isolation, from the emptiness of his own solitary journey. Through her actions and presence, he had found trust, respect, and a growing sense of admiration that bordered on something more profound. Each day spent in her company revealed new facets of her character, resilience, wisdom, compassion, and quiet strength that he had never witnessed before. The woman, in turn, seemed to accept his presence naturally. She did not demand explanations or test his intentions. She allowed him to exist in her world, to share in her daily life, and to learn from her example. Her trust was not given lightly, yet she offered it freely once she sensed sincerity in his heart. In this unspoken agreement, a connection was solidified, a bond that would continue to develop as they learned more about each other and the lives they had led separately, yet now intertwined through circumstance and mutual respect. As the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, he realized how much had changed in just a few days. The river incident, once a moment of fear and panic, had become a turning point in his life. It had led him to someone extraordinary, someone whose strength and courage inspired him in ways he could not have imagined. And in her presence, he felt a sense of belonging that had been missing for so long, a feeling that perhaps life had a way of guiding people to where they truly needed to be. As the days turned into a week, the young traveler began to feel increasingly at home in the small clearing. With the woman who had saved him, what had started as a terrifying encounter at the river had evolved into something much more profound. He was no longer just a visitor recovering from an accident. He had begun to step into the rhythm of her life, learning not only about survival in the wilderness, but also about the deep wisdom that shaped her every action. The mornings were filled with light labor and quiet observation. Together, they would fetch water from the river, gather firewood, and prepare meals. He noticed how she moved through these tasks with precision and care, never wasting effort, never rushing unnecessarily. Each gesture carried an unspoken lesson, the importance of balance, the value of patience, and the quiet power of consistency. He began to mirror her movements, learning not only how to survive, but how to live with intention. Every day was a lesson, and he felt himself growing stronger, not just physically but emotionally, under her guidance. She began to teach him about the forest surrounding them. At first, it was simple lessons: how to identify edible plants, how to avoid dangerous ones, and how to read the movement of animals. She would bend down, pointing to a leaf, explaining its use, or silently leading him to a spot where berries grew abundantly. His initial curiosity deepened into admiration as he realized that her knowledge was vast, a blend of practical survival skills and an intimate understanding of the natural world. The forest was not just land to her. It was home, teacher, and companion all at once. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the canopy, he asked her why she had saved him without hesitation, risking herself in the river. She paused, her hands brushing over the herbs she was tending. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but thoughtful. "I could not let someone die when I could help. Life is fragile. Every life is worth saving, even a stranger's." Her words struck him with their simplicity and depth. There was no expectation of reward, no desire for recognition, only a fundamental belief in doing what is right. Her philosophy of life was quiet but unwavering, and he found himself reflecting on the selflessness in her actions. As they worked side by side, he also began to learn about her past. She spoke gently of her late husband, describing him with warmth and respect. Though loss had shaped her life, she carried no bitterness. Instead, she had embraced her circumstances with resilience, raising her children with love and care, learning to face challenges alone yet never surrendering her spirit. Her story fascinated him, and he found himself drawn to the strength that shone through her calm exterior. Each tale she shared, whether of hardship or joy, gave him insight into her character, an extraordinary combination of courage, wisdom, and tenderness. Evenings were quieter but equally powerful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm golden hues across the clearing, they would sit near the fire, and she would share stories of the Apache people, their traditions, and their connection to the land. Her voice carried a rhythm that was both soothing and commanding, drawing him into the stories as if he were living them alongside her. He listened, captivated, realizing that he was not just learning about her life, but about a culture rich with knowledge, resilience, and respect for nature. The stories sparked a sense of wonder and humility within him. Through these days, their bond deepened in subtle ways. He began to notice how she observed him, her eyes filled with quiet curiosity and gentle concern. She would offer advice without pressure, correct mistakes with patience, and encourage him to try again when he faltered. Each action was deliberate, a reflection of care that was neither intrusive nor demanding. Slowly, he realized that trust was being built between them, not just in the practical sense of survival, but in the emotional sense of knowing that someone could truly see and understand him. One morning, while helping her gather firewood, he accidentally dropped a heavy log on his foot. Pain shot through him, and he grimaced, unable to move. She was immediately by his side, steadying him, her hands firm and comforting. She did not scold him or make him feel weak. Instead, she helped him relieve the pain, speaking softly and guiding him through the discomfort. In that moment, he felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. Her care was not conditional. It was instinctive, rooted in empathy and a deep understanding of human fragility. The incident reminded him once again of her strength, but also of the gentle humanity that defined her character. Days turned into weeks, and he began to feel a growing sense of belonging. The clearing that had seemed foreign and unfamiliar now felt like a sanctuary. He had learned to move through the forest quietly, to respect its rules, and to anticipate its surprises. Each day brought small victories, successfully preparing a meal, identifying plants, or mastering a technique she had shown him. With each accomplishment, he felt a sense of pride, but also a deeper appreciation for her guidance. It was not just about learning survival skills. It was about understanding life from her perspective, seeing the world through her eyes, and absorbing the quiet wisdom she offered. He also began to notice the subtler aspects of her personality, the moments when her eyes softened, the rare smiles she allowed herself, the way she hummed quietly while working. These glimpses into her inner world fascinated him. He realized that beneath her strength and resilience lay a depth of emotion and humanity that he had only begun to understand. She had faced immense challenges, yet she carried herself with grace and humility. Her life had taught her how to persevere, how to nurture, and how to remain unshaken by circumstances beyond her control. As they shared more stories, laughter occasionally broke through the routine of daily life. Sometimes he would stumble clumsily while learning a task, and she would chuckle softly, shaking her head before showing him the correct way. Other times, she would recount humorous moments from her past, and he would find himself laughing alongside her, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. These moments, small yet meaningful, strengthened their connection. Trust and camaraderie were growing between them, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that each had something to offer the other. One evening, as they watched the river reflect the colors of the setting sun, he felt a surge of realization. This relationship, formed initially by an act of rescue, was evolving into something more profound. He felt not just gratitude, but admiration, respect, and a deepening emotional connection. Her presence had begun to shape his days, influencing how he moved, how he thought, and how he felt about the world around him. The bond was not declared through words or grand gestures, but forged quietly, through trust, shared labor, and mutual understanding. He began to notice how her attention lingered on him at times, subtle gestures of care, small questions about his comfort, or quiet corrections meant to guide rather than reprimand. Her concern was never demanding, never forceful, but consistently present. Slowly, he understood that her care extended beyond the practical. It was emotional, protective, and nurturing. And in that understanding, he felt a sense of humility and wonder, recognizing that he had been allowed into a rare and intimate space within her life. The longer he stayed, the more he appreciated the rhythm of life she had established. Each day had a purpose, each task a meaning, and each moment a lesson. He began to see that her life, though shaped by loss and hardship, was a testament to resilience, intelligence, and grace. Her independence was inspiring, her wisdom quietly profound, and her presence a steadying force that made him feel safe, supported, and challenged all at once. By the end of part 3 of his journey, he realized something fundamental. His life had been forever altered by this encounter. The river had brought him to her, and in her presence he had discovered courage, patience, empathy, and a sense of belonging he had not known existed. The bond between them had grown beyond the practical, beyond gratitude or friendship, into a connection that was emotional, profound, and quietly transformative. He understood that the woman who had saved him was more than a rescuer. She was a teacher, a guide, and a force of nature whose impact on his life would remain long after the river and the wilderness had faded from memory. In the quiet evenings, as they shared firelight and stories, he felt a sense of anticipation and curiosity about what lay ahead. He wondered how this connection would continue to grow, how their lives would intertwine, and what lessons he would learn next. The woman, ever observant and serene, seemed to sense his thoughts, offering a gentle smile that acknowledged both the present and the promise of the future. And as he looked into the fire, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his life, but for the unexpected journey that had brought him to her. As the days stretched into weeks, the young traveler began to feel the depth of the bond forming between him and the woman who had saved him. What had started as a life-or-death encounter at the river had grown into something far more complex, an unspoken connection that touched both the heart and mind. Each day spent in her presence revealed new layers of her personality, strength, and kindness, and he could no longer see her simply as the woman who had rescued him. She was someone remarkable, someone who had faced immense challenges, and yet carried herself with dignity, wisdom, and quiet courage. It was during one particularly calm morning that he realized how much he had come to depend on her, not in a way that diminished him, but in a way that made him feel supported, seen, and understood. They were walking along the riverbank, gathering herbs for the small fire she used to cook their meals, when he stumbled over a hidden rock and nearly fell into the water. Without hesitation, she caught him by the arm, steadying him with a firm yet gentle grip. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering, and in that moment he saw more than concern. He saw a depth of care that went beyond the practical. She wanted him to be safe, not just because it was necessary, but because she cared. This moment stayed with him throughout the day. As they returned to her clearing, he found himself thinking about how rare it was to encounter someone who combined such strength and independence with such genuine compassion. She had survived loss, raised her children alone, and navigated the challenges of her life with unwavering resilience. Yet, despite her strength, she showed empathy, patience, and understanding in ways that made him feel valued and respected. It was this combination of qualities that fascinated him, and slowly his admiration began to evolve into something deeper, a mixture of gratitude, respect, and an emerging emotional attachment. Over the following days, their interactions became more personal, more intimate in the quietest sense. He began to share more of his own fears, his past struggles, and the moments in life that had shaped him. She listened with patience, never judging, never interrupting, offering only gentle guidance or a reassuring smile when it seemed needed. Through her attentive presence, he felt a growing sense of safety and trust. For the first time in his life, he realized that someone could truly understand him without needing him to prove his worth or hide his vulnerabilities. One evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the clearing, he decided to try something he had never done before. He expressed his feelings of gratitude and admiration aloud. His voice was hesitant at first, unsure if the words would carry the weight of what he felt. "I don't know how to say this," he began, "but you've changed the way I see things. You've saved me not just from the river, but from feeling completely alone." She looked at him calmly, her dark eyes softening with a warmth that made his heart race. She didn't interrupt, she simply listened, allowing him the space to speak honestly. Her response was quiet yet powerful. "I did what anyone should do," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm glad you see it that way. Life is fragile and connections matter. I've seen too many people drift away or lose themselves. I don't want that to happen to you or to anyone I care for." The words were simple, yet they carried an emotional weight that left him speechless. He realized in that moment that her care extended beyond the immediate rescue. It was a steady, enduring presence that demanded no repayment, only respect and openness in return. The following days brought small, tender moments that further deepened their bond. She would prepare extra food when she noticed he was hungrier than usual, or she would quietly adjust his blanket by the fire to keep him warm at night. Her gestures were never demanding or forced. They were natural extensions of her character, subtle expressions of care that spoke louder than words ever could. He found himself anticipating her actions, noticing the little things that revealed her attentiveness and compassion. Each moment reinforced the realization that he was becoming emotionally connected to her in ways he had never expected. A turning point came one afternoon when he attempted to leave for a short walk deeper into the forest, hoping to regain a sense of independence. She followed quietly, her presence calm but insistent. "You cannot go alone," she said simply. He felt a pang of frustration initially but quickly understood the unspoken truth. She did not want to control him, but she wanted to protect him. The river had been a reminder of how fragile life could be, and she had no intention of allowing another accident. In that moment, he realized the depth of her care. It was not just about survival. It was about wanting him to thrive safely and fully. Their relationship, previously defined by the act of rescue, had begun to shift into something more profound. Emotional dependence was growing on both sides, though neither spoke it explicitly. He found himself seeking her approval, her smile, her reassurance, not out of fear, but out of a desire to be connected, to belong, and to share in the warmth and stability she offered. And she, in turn, seemed to accept his presence with a quiet satisfaction, allowing the bond to grow naturally, without pressure or expectation. One evening, as they sat near the fire, she began to speak of her own fears and vulnerabilities. "I have lived many years alone," she said softly. "I have learned to protect myself and my children, to face hardships without complaint, but sometimes I feel the weight of it all. I did not expect anyone to come into my life and change it so suddenly." Her admission was unexpected, revealing a side of her rarely shown to others. He felt a surge of empathy, realizing that her strength did not make her immune to loneliness or longing. It made her courage all the more remarkable. The traveler realized that he was no longer just a guest in her life. He was becoming part of it, woven into the quiet routines, the shared tasks, and the moments of mutual understanding. Their lives had become intertwined in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Each day brought new lessons, new experiences, and new reminders of the bond that had formed. What had begun as gratitude had blossomed into admiration, trust, and a growing emotional intimacy that neither could deny. He began to notice the subtle ways she expressed her care, through lingering glances, the careful preparation of meals, the gentle corrections during tasks, and the moments when she would simply sit near him, allowing her presence to be felt without words. Each action carried meaning, a quiet affirmation of their growing connection. He realized that she was not just protective or nurturing. She was teaching him about love, trust, and the depth of human connection in the most understated way possible. As the weeks passed, he became increasingly aware of the change within himself. His feelings toward her were no longer limited to gratitude. They had evolved into something more profound, more emotional. He admired her resilience, her wisdom, and her quiet strength. He cherished her kindness, her patience, and the unwavering support she offered without expectation. And though he had not yet spoken of it directly, he understood that this bond, the one forged through rescue, trust, and shared experience, was transforming into a deep emotional attachment, one that would shape the next chapters of their lives. By the end of this period, the traveler realized a fundamental truth. He could not imagine leaving the clearing, leaving the forest, or leaving her. The woman who had dragged him from the river was no longer just a savior. She was a central part of his life, someone whose presence provided safety, warmth, and belonging. He felt a sense of awe at the way she had seamlessly integrated him into her life, guiding, nurturing, and connecting with him in ways that went beyond mere survival. The river had brought him to her, but it was her heart and strength that had captured his own. The emotional transformation was now undeniable. He understood that the bond between them had shifted from simple gratitude to a profound, unspoken connection. She had become a source of inspiration, comfort, and emotional grounding. In return, he felt a growing responsibility to be worthy of her trust, her care, and the quiet love that was beginning to emerge between them. And as he sat by the fire, watching her tend to the flames with the same calm precision that had first drawn him in, he knew that their lives were no longer separate. They had merged, shaped by experience, care, and an emotional closeness that neither had anticipated but both had. Welcomed, the days that followed felt different to the young traveler. The river, the forest, and the clearing were no longer just settings of survival. They had become the backdrop of a life that was slowly being rebuilt, reshaped, and shared. He had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of the quiet rhythms of the woman's world. But beyond the skills and lessons, there was something far more significant, a bond that had evolved from gratitude and trust into a connection that neither of them could ignore. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the trees and illuminated the small clearing, he noticed her preparing breakfast with a gentle focus he had come to admire. He moved closer, offering to help with the fire and the cooking. She glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips, and nodded. It was a simple gesture, but it carried meaning. In that moment, he realized how seamlessly he had become part of her life, how natural it felt to share in the routines of her world. He felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. After breakfast, they walked together along the riverbank, gathering herbs and small branches for the day's tasks. The river glistened in the morning light, peaceful now, yet still carrying the memory of the day he had almost lost his life. He glanced at her, taking in the quiet strength in her posture, the grace in her movements, and the warmth in her eyes. He wanted to speak, to tell her how much she had come to mean to him, but the words felt heavy. Instead, he let his actions speak, moving beside her, helping with the tasks, and sharing in the simple moments of daily life. As the day progressed, he realized that his feelings had grown deeper than he had anticipated. Gratitude had transformed into admiration, and admiration into an emotional attachment that was impossible to ignore. He found himself seeking her presence, wanting to hear her voice, to share in her world, and to be near her in the quiet moments between the work and the routine. Every glance, every gesture, every word exchanged carried significance, reinforcing the bond that had formed over weeks of shared experience and trust. That evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the clearing, he finally found the courage to speak. He turned to her, his heart pounding, and said, "I don't want to leave this place. I don't want to leave you." His voice was steady, but the weight of his emotions was clear. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and understanding. For a moment there was silence, filled only by the gentle crackling of the fire and the distant sound of the river. Then she spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "You do not need to leave. This place, these days, they are yours too. I have felt a bond with you since the river, and it has only grown. Life is fragile and connections are rare. You are part of my world now as I am part of yours." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth, sincerity, and emotional depth. In that moment, he felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over him. The connection they had built, nurtured through trust, care, and shared experience, was now acknowledged openly. The following days were filled with a new sense of harmony. Their routines continued, but now there was an added depth, a recognition that their lives were intertwined not just by circumstance, but by choice. They moved through each day together, gathering, cooking, and tending to the land, their actions guided by mutual respect and affection. He noticed the small gestures she offered, the subtle ways she showed care, an extra blanket, a warm meal, a reassuring touch. Each act reinforced the emotional bond that had become the foundation of their shared life. He also began to understand the depth of her love in a way that went beyond physical presence. She had lived through loss, hardship, and solitude, yet she had opened her heart to him, allowing trust and connection to grow naturally. It was not sudden or forced. It was steady, deliberate, and genuine. Her love was reflected in her actions, in the way she nurtured both the land and the people she cared for. And in turn, he felt a responsibility, not out of obligation but out of genuine desire, to honor her trust, support her, and share in her life fully. One afternoon, as they rested by the river after a long morning of work, he noticed her gaze lingering on him with an intensity that he had not seen before. "You have changed since the river," she said quietly, a small smile on her lips. "Not just in strength, but in understanding, in patience, in seeing the world differently. I am glad you stayed." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that their bond had transformed both of them, teaching patience, resilience, and empathy. It was a connection that went beyond mere companionship. It was a mutual shaping of hearts and minds. The traveler began to notice the ways in which their lives complemented each other. Her wisdom and experience guided his learning and growth, while his curiosity and energy brought new perspectives to her life. They shared laughter, stories, and quiet moments, building memories that would last a lifetime. The clearing by the river had become more than a place of survival. It had become a home, a sanctuary, and a space where trust, care, and love flourished naturally. As weeks turned into months, their connection continued to deepen. The river, once a place of fear, had become a symbol of their shared journey, a reminder of how life could change in an instant, and how trust, courage, and care could transform even the most perilous circumstances into lasting bonds. He reflected on how far they had come, from a chance encounter in danger to a life filled with purpose, learning, and emotional connection. The woman who had once been a stranger was now central to his life, and he to hers. There were moments of quiet reflection as well. He often found himself thinking about the journey that had led him to this place, the steps, the decisions, and the near-tragic moments that had ultimately brought them together. And he realized that their bond was not just about the past, but also about the future. It was about the choices they would make together, the life they would build, and the connection that had grown from a single act of courage. One evening, as they watched the sunset over the river, he reached for her hand. She allowed him to hold it, a gesture that carried a depth of meaning beyond words. In that simple act, he felt the culmination of weeks of shared experience, trust, and growing emotional attachment. They sat in silence for a long time, the world around them fading as they focused on the quiet presence of each other. It was a moment of understanding, of acknowledgement, and of commitment, not in a formal sense, but in the shared certainty that their lives were now linked. Life in the clearing continued with the same rhythms, but now each day was colored by the knowledge that they were not alone. They supported each other, learned from each other, and cherished the bond that had been forged in extraordinary circumstances. The traveler felt a sense of completeness, a feeling that he had found something rare, a connection built on trust, respect, care, and an emerging love that had grown naturally without force or expectation. The woman, too, felt the change in her life. She had spent years navigating solitude, loss, and responsibility, yet the presence of the traveler had brought new warmth and energy into her world. She no longer faced her days alone, and she found joy in the shared experiences, the small victories, and the moments of quiet companionship that defined their life together. Their bond was now unshakable, built on shared history, mutual respect, and the understanding that each had found in the other something essential, a partner in life, a confidant, and a source of enduring care. As the story reaches its close, the traveler reflects on the journey from the river to the clearing, from fear to safety, from gratitude to emotional attachment. He recognizes the extraordinary nature of the woman who had saved him, not only in the moment of rescue, but in the life she had built, the wisdom she imparted, and the love she offered quietly and consistently. And he realizes that the bond they share is more than survival. It is life itself, a testament to courage, connection, and the unexpected ways in which human hearts can find each other. Finally, as night falls over the clearing, he sits by the fire, the woman beside him, and he feels a sense of peace and belonging he had never known before. The river, the forest, and the routines of daily life are no longer just a backdrop. They are part of their shared story. They have found something rare and precious in each other: trust, care, and a bond that will endure. And as he looks at her, he knows that the woman who once dragged him from the river is now the center of his life, and he has become a part of hers, forever intertwined in a shared journey of survival, understanding, and love.